I got revenge on my gold-digging boyfriend. Sometimes love can be the best thing that can ever happen to you. And sometimes, well, sometimes you meet a guy like Jeremy. Let me tell you about Jeremy. And more importantly, let me tell you how I got revenge on him. My loser gold-digging boyfriend. I grew up in a super wealthy family. This meant that I was certainly privileged and used to hang out with people who were as rich as my mom and dad. I got to enjoy long, fun vacations every few months, as well as incredible shopping sprees. I didn't get told no very often, and my parents sort of liked spoiling me. But I don't think I was a good-for-nothing brat. I studied really hard and I wanted to find my own way in life. I saw how hard my parents worked and how passionate they were about their careers, and I wanted to be just like them. They grabbed the bull by the horns and made their own way in life. My mom came from money, but my dad was a self-made man, and they fell in love because of their mutual ambition. But before we move on, like this video, hit the subscribe button, and activate the notification bell. It'll let you live 20 amazing years longer. Trust me, it works. Anyways, back to the story. I wanted someone just like that, someone who could push me to be the best version of myself that I could be. Instead, I met Jeremy, and like a fool, I fell in love with him. Now, I told you I mostly hung out with people as rich as my family, but that wasn't because I was an elitist. It was just that the activities that I engaged in and the school that I went to weren't frequented by blue-colored families. It was normal to have friends who could afford similar luxuries as my family could. He was kind of a bore, so it didn't last long, but I don't regret that experience. He was kind towards me and really smart, so I liked him at first. But after a while, though, I realized that I was just going through the motions. I wanted someone who made me feel something real, someone who made my heart beat faster whenever he kissed me. My second and third boyfriends were rich as well. For different reasons, it simply didn't work, you know? It's no big deal. Some relationships go the distance, and others simply fun anecdotes. When I met Jeremy, though, I thought he was the one. His smile was so bright and big, and he made me laugh so hard. Do you know how I met him? I went out for dinner with some friends, and he was our waiter. He was a bit of a flirt, but I liked him. My friends teased me about liking the guy serving our food, but I didn't see anything wrong with it. He wasn't rich, and that was okay with me. So when the night was over, I was sort of bummed out that I wouldn't be seeing him again. Much to my surprise, as my friends and I were leaving the restaurant, I heard someone walking right behind us. "Excuse me," Jeremy told me when I turned around. "I hope you don't think I'm a creep or anything like that, but I finished my shift in half an hour. Could I buy you a cup of coffee or something?" I couldn't believe it. He seemed so earnest and sweet, and I loved a guy being so forward. So after thinking it over for a moment, I finally said yes. My friends couldn't believe it. None of them, actually, not even myself, had ever dated a non-rich guy, and yet I told them to go back home without me. I'd be staying at the restaurant, waiting for Jeremy to finish his shift. Our first date was amazing. I can't even explain it. We talked for hours, and he seemed like such a great guy. We shared our first kiss that night, and I felt my heart beating faster. Jeremy seemed like the kind of guy who could give me everything I wanted. I had no need for money, and I didn't want anyone to support me financially. I just wanted to meet my soulmate. And like a total fool, I thought Jeremy was it. He was a really nice guy, and his smile made me melt like warm butter. Now, Jeremy didn't come from a wealthy family. He'd been working since before he finished high school. When I asked him if he went to a college, he told me this big sob story about how he couldn't possibly afford it. "I'd love to study and do something with my life, but I think I'll be a waiter my whole life. And that kills me," he said. And I felt so bad for him. In my mind, Jeremy was a guy who had so much ambition, but life had just dealt him a bad hand. I was the means to help him and was determined to do it. I found myself spoiling him often, buying him new clothes, video games, and even a brand new TV. He was so grateful, and at first he didn't ask me for anything. I was the one giving him stuff just because I liked to see him smile. But after a while, well, things began to change. Requests were subtle at first, and he managed to make me think I was the one coming up with ideas for gifts to shower him with. I was so in love that I didn't even notice it. You know, he'd make these offhand remarks about needing this or that, or mentioning while watching a movie how cool something was. I would think it was nice to surprise him with whatever he had mentioned and actually believed him when he pretended to be surprised. But after a while, he grew bolder. Jeremy thought I wouldn't notice, that I was too in love with him and had already bought his good guy act. Well, I gotta tell you, my mom and dad raised no dummy. So when he started actually asking directly for things, I became kind of suspicious. Sure, requesting a gift or two wasn't anything terrible, but the way he talked? It was almost as if I was supposed to give stuff to him merely because I had more than him, like I owed him something. When he asked me for a gift for his birthday, I didn't think much of it. It seemed normal even. Why couldn't he choose what he was getting? It was a really special occasion after all. But then he wanted more and more, and I got sort of annoyed. But it was far from over. We had our anniversary, and Jeremy asked me if I saw our relationship going the distance. I said yes, that I loved him dearly, and I'd love to build a future together. The key word there was together. I didn't want to be the only one building something, you know? But that was exactly what he seemed to hear. Suddenly, he claimed that he had been fired. But I didn't really believe him. It seemed kind of odd since the restaurant he worked in always was so busy, and he was a good server. Something told me that he had just up and quit, figuring I'd be supporting him from then on, like he had me wrapped around his little finger. I was patient with him at first. I figured I might be overly suspicious, but remained alert to the signs. I noticed that the stuff I bought him suddenly went missing, and I decided to do some research. Lo and behold, I found them in a nearby pawn shop. That lazy bum didn't even bother traveling a bit to actually sell my gifts. Imagine how mad I was. I confronted him and threatened to leave him. Jeremy begged me not to. He looked so heartbroken and sad. I actually thought that maybe, just maybe, I'd managed to reach him. He was going to change and get a job and we'd have a future together. Yeah, right. As if that was going to happen. No, come on. Those kind of miracles don't happen in real life. I decided to give him a second chance, but I was on him like a hawk. Jeremy pretended to be a changed man for like a month or two, and then he figured that I had really forgiven him, and that was when the BS started all over again. Now this is when I got petty. I know I could have dumped him and be done with Jeremy, but it didn't seem fair. He had tried to use me and take advantage of my trust. Why should he get off easy? I had been paying for his utilities, and he even had an extension of my credit card for emergencies. Yeah, you guessed it right. He totally used it for things that no one would consider an emergency at all. I decided to shut off all utilities at his apartment, or should I say my apartment, because, yeah, I was paying the rent. I also destroyed his laptop while he was out on a guys' night with his friends, and cut up the credit cards that I gave him, as well as his own. He was going to have to request them all again. I donated all his clothes so that at least he'd be useful to society one time in his entire life. Sure, I didn't do this all at once, mind you. I saved the most obvious stuff for last. All the smallest and pettiest things I did to him while pretending not to know what he was talking about. He asked me to help fix his laptop, and I told him I was too busy with work to do anything about it. Jeremy didn't understand why his utilities were cut off, and when he called to discover what was going on, he was told that they couldn't give him any information. After all, everything was on my name. Eventually, he finally caught up with what I was doing. I happily told him that he had it coming and he shouldn't use people for their money. He was stunned and tried to pretend that he didn't love me because I was rich. "Babe, you're my entire life," he cried out. But I wasn't going to be giving him another chance. You know the saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. He begged and pleaded, but I was done with him. Ever since that moment, his life went absolutely downhill. Jeremy had gotten too used to not working and just doing nothing all day like a couch potato. So he didn't do well on any of the lame jobs that he tried to get. Last I heard of him, he was living at a friend's house and was already overstaying his welcome. He keeps asking me to borrow some money to get back on his feet on Facebook, but I never reply. You might think I was way too mean, but I have no regrets. I gave him a chance to change his ways or move on, and he decides to try and manipulate me. I don't appreciate a guy playing with my feelings just to get a free ride. I hope that Jeremy learned his lesson and doesn't try to gold dig his way into another apartment. But honestly, I think he's too foolish for his own good. He's still super cute, and that can get a girl like me to fall for him for a year or two. But then he'll be right back to square one, and his good looks aren't going to last forever. Thanks for watching. What's the worst revenge you've taken against someone who wronged you? Let us know in the comments. Do you think I went too far with what I did to Jeremy? I'd love to read your opinion. Please don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.
I know, it sounds bad. It's not a nice thing to do, baby trapping a boyfriend into staying in your life. But that's exactly what I did. My name is Amelia, and I'd like to let you know how I came to do something so drastic. I hope that once you know my side of the story, you won't still think I'm some kind of monster. Ever since I was a young girl, I've always wanted to be a mom. I would play with my dolls all the time and pretend they were all my daughters and sons. You see, I was my parents' only child, and they refused to give me any brothers or sisters. I pled and pled, but it was no good. They were determined. But before we move on, like this video, hit that subscribe button, and activate the notification bell. This will let you live 20 amazing years longer. Trust me, it works. They said they only needed a single daughter, and they loved me so much. Why expand our family any further? Plus, mom and dad didn't have any siblings either, so I didn't even have any cousins to play with. All my friends from school had big, happy families. When I arrived home, I only had my parents to keep me company, and they were frequently too busy with work to pay me any attention. So I grew up being a really lonesome child. I did have friends at school, but that just wasn't enough for me. Something was missing. My toys and dolls became my children, and my family suddenly expanded. It wasn't real, but it was something. Mom used to say that I had an overactive imagination, and that I would overcome my obsession with large families eventually. But I never did. Every single time I met someone new, I asked about their siblings and got super jealous if they had any. I wanted to know everything about how that felt like, and perhaps I might have made a few people a bit uncomfortable with my questions. Now, I'm not saying I'm some kind of crazy cat lady, but with siblings and children instead. I want to have just 3 or 4 kids, nothing else. It's not like I want 12 babies crawling around my house. But still, it's something that clearly marked my childhood, and I couldn't imagine growing up into an adult and continuing feeling so alone. So when I met the guy who'd become my boyfriend, Kyle, I wasn't too sure he was the right guy for me. After all, we were both kind of young, and teenage boys don't usually know if they want a big happy family or just have a nice time. When Kyle asked me out, I said, not at first. He kept insisting, though, telling me he had fallen for me at first sight, and that I was the girl for him. He romanced me, and bit by bit, I began falling in love as well. So eventually, we began dating, and soon enough, it was official. We were boyfriend and girlfriend, and even made plans to go to the same college after we graduated. I told Kyle how important the idea of having a baby soon after I began college was, and at the time, he agreed with me. I don't really think that he was lying. After all, he did seem to like children, but it was more that he figured there was more time to grow up in that way. He probably thought that I was just fantasizing, but that I wouldn't really demand to have a baby right out of high school. Well, that's where Kyle was wrong. After being accepted into the same college, Kyle and I moved into an apartment close to the campus. It was comfortable and lovely, and we could study a whole lot there. Or at least, that was the intention. Because Kyle suddenly seemed to realize how fun parties could be when he wasn't under his parents' thumbs. Oh boy, that was when things started to get messy. I've always been super responsible and loved that Kyle enjoyed studying as much as I did. He was a straight A student back in high school, and I figured that wouldn't change when he entered college. But suddenly, he seemed to be more interested in going out drinking and dancing than waking up early for an exam. I was worried about him, but that was far from the most shocking realization. When I told him that one of the couples we knew back from high school were expecting their first son, he shivered and told me, "Oh man, they're ruining their lives. They should have waited at least 5 years before doing anything like that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had told Kyle loud and clear before we even moved together that I wanted a child of my own, soon. When I reminded him of that fact, he just laughed and brushed me off. "Surely I wasn't serious, right?" he asked. But I was. And so the constant arguments and bickering began. We used to get along so well, but from the moment that I realized he didn't want children yet, well, everything became a big mess. I kept begging him to go through with what he had promised me. Kyle told me he would. He absolutely wanted to have kids with me, just not yet. Maybe after we graduated, most likely after we both had gotten great jobs. I couldn't possibly wait that long. I needed a child right that instant, and it wasn't fair that other couples we knew were getting pregnant, and I had to wait. I had been super patient all throughout high school. I knew I was too young back then, but now it was the right time, and I didn't want my boyfriend to be the person stopping me from fulfilling my dreams. His excuse was that we needed to wait in order to have enough time to study hard and graduate with honors. But I know that was a lie, and so do you, because I told you how Kyle was out partying all the time. What he didn't want was to lose the chance to be super irresponsible and go out drinking every single night. A child would be a burden to him, I could hear it in his voice, even if he didn't actually utter those words. It was so frustrating, and I couldn't comprehend why he was acting that way. Kyle had always been so sweet and considerate toward my needs. He had also been such an amazing student. Why was he changing all of a sudden? Something else began to bother me during these hard months. He used to be kinda shy back when we were in high school, but now he had become somewhat of a social butterfly. This scared me because he suddenly had so many friends who were girls. He tried to reassure me, telling me they were just friends and he didn't think any of them were hot or anything like that. Kyle would always say, "I love you and only you, babe. Stop being so jealous." I'd never cheat on the love of my life. And that sounded so sweet, sure, but something sounded kind of fake about it. I knew that he loved me. I didn't doubt this fact because I saw it in his eyes and in the way he kissed me. But college and partying was changing my Kyle. And what would happen if one night, drunk, he ended up messing up with a girl? Then I'd lose him forever, and I couldn't allow that to happen. So that's when that perfect idea came to mind. The solution to both my problems. Yeah, I know, it's messed up and all, but at least it would give our relationship a spark. I knew he wanted one too because he had told me so. Kyle was just scared and too mesmerized by the fun parties to remember who he really was inside. After a particularly nasty argument, Kyle left and didn't return that night. He later claimed he had just slept over at one of his friend's dorms. A man, of course, he reassured me. Kyle told me he had just needed some time away from me. That was when I knew there was no more time to lose. If I didn't tie him down right then and there, he'd end up drifting away from me, and I'd lose the love of my life and the man I knew would become the father of my babies. I knew there was no way to convince him to be intimate without using any protection, so I had to be sneaky about it. I got into his drawer and poked a hole in all his little packages. Believe me when I say that I was all over him those next few weeks, just to make sure the plan worked. And wouldn't you believe it, my period was late the following month. When I took a pregnancy test, it was positive. I was so excited, so happy. It was the best day of my life. I rushed into the bedroom with a test in my hands and told him the great news. Well, that's when things got bad. Kyle wasn't happy. He was shocked and looked terrified. I tried to calm him down, telling him everything was going to be all right, that we could finally be this big, happy family. But he looked pale and weak. He couldn't even seem to speak. He didn't understand how it could possibly have happened. I couldn't tell him what I'd done, but that didn't matter. I explained to him that I was keeping my baby, our baby, and that he needed to buckle down and stop partying right away. He had to make sure everything was okay in our lives when the baby arrived. Oh, believe me, that was when he freaked out for real. He refused to do anything of the sort, and we began arguing. He kept telling me he didn't want to be a father and that I needed to solve this problem. I told him I was going to keep our child no matter what. Suddenly, Kyle turned around and stormed away from me. I tried to get him to stay, but he just got in his car and drove off. I was devastated. Honestly, I thought that my boyfriend would step up to the plate and be responsible for his new family, but instead, he simply ran away. I went back into my apartment, asking myself how I'd take care of a baby all on my own, and what my family would say. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I tossed and turned in bed, asking myself if Kyle was really going to abandon me and the baby. I was so worried and couldn't stop crying. I began to wonder if my plan had backfired, and would I have to face the music all on my own? The next morning, though, I heard someone walking into the apartment I shared with my boyfriend. It was Kyle, looking guilty and exhausted. I walked up to him and he hugged me so tightly and kissed me like he hadn't seen me in years. Kyle apologized for his reaction and explained that he just freaked out. He had talked to his parents during the night and realized that he needed to man up and take responsibility for his baby. I was so happy. I forgave him immediately, of course, and things seemed to go back to normal. Kyle really matured through my pregnancy and went back to being a great student. He asked me to marry him soon after, and we were husband and wife by the time our baby girl, Tilda, arrived into our lives. We couldn't be happier. See? Everything turned out for the better. I baby-trapped my boyfriend, but I did it with only the best of intentions. Thanks for watching. Do you think the end sometimes justifies the means? Have you ever done anything sort of messed up to make sure your partner didn't make a bad decision? Let us know in the comments. Please don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.